I think you've been telling people I was dead. He said it quietly, not angry. Just matter of fact, the way you'd say, I think it's going to rain today. But the color that left my brother's face in that moment, I'd never seen anything like it. 32 years old, and he looked like a little boy who'd just been caught doing something terrible. Because he had been. Let me back up. I'm the kind of person who takes the bus not because I have to, but because I genuinely don't mind it. I know that sounds strange. Most people in Calgary treat the bus like a last resort. Something you do when your car's in the shop, or you've had one too many at the work Christmas party. But I've always liked it. The rhythm of it. The way strangers exist next to each other without any obligation to be anything. You can just be a person on a bus and nobody needs anything from you. I was 28 when this happened. I'd been living in a basement suite in Bridgeland for about 8 months. The kind of place where you can hear your upstairs neighbor's every footstep and the hot water takes 4 minutes to arrive, but the rent was something I could actually afford on my own. That part mattered. Being on my own mattered. Before Bridgeland, I'd been living with my brother and his wife in their house in Tuscany, the neighborhood in the northwest, not the country. Though he'd be the first to tell you the views were just as good. He'd offered after our mom passed. I'd just finished my certificate in bookkeeping and hadn't found steady work yet, and he said it would be silly for me to burn through my savings on rent when there was a perfectly good guest room sitting empty. I believed him. That was my first mistake, though I didn't know it at the time. My brother is 6 years older than me, and for most of my life, he was the person I looked up to most. He'd been the one who showed up for every school thing after Dad left. He drove me to my piano recitals in high school, even though he thought classical music was boring. When Mom got sick the first time, the breast cancer scare, which turned out to be nothing, he was the one who sat with her at the clinic because I was 17 and couldn't drive yet. He was the dependable one, the responsible one. His wife is a different story. I want to be careful here because I know how it sounds when you say, I never liked my sister-in-law. It sounds petty. It sounds like jealousy. But this was never about jealousy. This was about the fact that from the day they got together, she made it very clear that my brother's attention and loyalty were a finite resource, and she intended to be the only one drawing from that account. She wasn't cruel about it. That would have been easier to name. She was just strategic. She'd suggest plans on the exact Sundays my brother and I had standing breakfast dates. She'd bring up money whenever the three of us were talking about something that had nothing to do with money. She had a way of making me feel like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome in a relationship I'd had my whole life. When I moved in with them after Mom died, it got worse. The guest room was on the opposite end of the house from their bedroom, which I was grateful for. But I was expected to be quiet by 9. My parking spot in the driveway was temporary. There was a conversation once, and I will never forget this, where my sister-in-law mentioned, very casually over dinner, that she'd looked into what it would cost to convert the guest room into a home gym. My brother said nothing. I found an apartment the next month. What I didn't find out until much later was what happened to Mom's estate while I was busy trying not to take up too much space in their lives. Mom didn't have much. She'd never been wealthy. But she had a small RRSP she'd been contributing to since the 90s, a life insurance policy she'd taken out when we were kids, and a piece of property, a tiny lakefront lot in Invermere that her own mother had left her. Nothing that would make anyone rich, but more than enough to make a difference to someone like me who was starting from scratch. Mom had a will. I know she had a will because she told me she had a will 2 weeks before she died. She was in the hospital by then, the second time, the time that counted. She was tired and she didn't want to talk about hard things for long. But she took my hand and she said, I made sure it's fair, sweetheart. Half and half, you and your brother. Don't let him talk you out of anything. I thought it was just the morphine making her say odd things. I thought everything was handled. My brother had been the executor. He'd handled everything while I was barely functional with grief. And he told me there wasn't much left after the medical costs and the funeral and settling her debts. I got a check for $4,000. I thought that was what there was. So I took it and I started over and I didn't ask questions because asking questions felt like accusing my brother of something and I wasn't ready to believe he was capable of that. I got a job doing accounts payable at a small commercial flooring company in the southeast end. Not glamorous, the office smelled permanently of adhesive and someone always left the communal fridge in a state that could generously be described as biological. But the people were decent, my manager trusted me, and after a year I was handling payroll too. I was rebuilding. Slowly, but I was doing it. The march I'm about to tell you about, I was taking the C train downtown and then a connecting bus out to a client meeting. I'd offered to do a site visit for one of our suppliers. We were reconciling some invoices from the previous quarter, and it was faster to do it in person. I had my bag, my laptop, a coffee I'd already burned my tongue on twice, and absolutely no idea that my life was about to change on a Tuesday morning in the middle of a Calgary winter. The bus was half full. I got on at the shelter near 10th Street and grabbed a seat near the middle. A few stops later, an older man got on. He moved carefully, the way people do when their knees aren't cooperating, and he was carrying a paper bag from a pharmacy in one arm and trying to manage his bus pass with the other. The bus lurched forward before he'd properly steadied himself, and he grabbed the nearest pole, but the pharmacy bag swung and the contents rattled, and he looked momentarily mortified. Nobody moved. I moved. I got up and said he could have my seat. He thanked me, genuinely, not in that reflexive way people do when they don't really mean it. We ended up talking for the rest of the ride. He was easy to talk to, the kind of older person who asks questions and actually listens to the answers. He asked what I did, and I told him. He laughed at my description of the fridge situation. He told me he was just in from Kelowna, visiting a few people, and dealing with some administrative business he'd been putting off too long. He asked where I was headed, and I told him the intersection. He got quiet for a moment, and then he said that was interesting, because he was actually heading to the same part of the city. Something about an old account at a property management office near there. What company? I asked, mostly just making conversation. He told me the name. I didn't recognize it. I said as much. You wouldn't, he said. It's small. My son-in-law set it up about 10 years ago. He paused. My late daughter's husband, he said it simply, not looking for sympathy, just stating a fact, the way you do when you've been carrying something long enough that the weight of it has become ordinary. I said I was sorry. He nodded. I lost touch with her family after she passed. Her husband remarried. It happens. He looked out the window, but I always meant to go back and look at the account she'd left. There was some property she'd co-signed on. I'm the secondary holder. I should have dealt with it years ago. When we got off at the same stop, I walked with him because it seemed strange not to. He was slower on the ice than I was, and the sidewalk outside the office building hadn't been properly sanded. I wasn't going to just leave him there. The property management office was on the second floor of a low-rise building. Small. One receptionist, two inner offices, a waiting area with chairs that had seen better decades. My supplier's office was in the same building, different suite, so I told him I'd walk him up. The receptionist asked who he was there to see. He gave a name, and then the door to the inner office opened, and my brother walked out. He stopped so completely and so suddenly that the folder he was holding dropped the last inch onto the floor and he just left it there. His face went through about 4 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. I watched him arrive at something that looked a lot like fear. The older man looked at him. Then he looked at me, then back at my brother. "You're the bookkeeper," he said to me slowly. Not a question, putting something together. "I'm his sister," I said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. "Your sister," the man said, turning to my brother. His voice was still quiet, still composed. But there was something underneath it now. Something that had been patient for a very long time and was deciding, in that moment, whether to stop being patient. "I was told your sister died. In the same accident as your mother." I heard my own voice say, "What?" before I decided to speak. My brother said my name. Just my name, like that was going to do anything. "I'm sorry," I said to the man. I was trying to stay very calm. "I don't understand. Who are you?" he told me. He was my mother's uncle. her mother's younger brother, which made him my great uncle, the one I'd been told had cut off contact with the family decades ago over some old argument with my grandmother, the one my brother had mentioned once, maybe twice in passing, when mom was sick. He's not around. He's been gone since before we were born. Don't worry about him. He had been in contact with my mother. Not constantly. They'd written letters, actual letters, a few times a year, for the last decade of her life. He'd been the one who told her to get a proper will made. He'd been named in it, not as a beneficiary, but as a secondary witness, someone my mother trusted to know what her wishes were. He'd found out she died through an old neighbor who'd seen the obituary. He'd written to my brother asking about the estate and about me. My brother had written back to say that I had also passed, that we'd both been in a car accident. I was standing there, alive, in a property management office on the second floor of a building on a sanded-down Tuesday in March, listening to a man describe being told I was dead. My brother was looking at the floor. "Why?" I said. I wasn't yelling. I couldn't yell. I didn't have the air for it. "Why would you say that?" He didn't answer right away. My great-uncle looked at him steadily. The receptionist had gone very still. "The property," my great-uncle said, to no one in particular, like he'd just worked out a math problem. "The Invermere lot." I looked at my brother. Something shifted in his face, the last of whatever composure he'd been holding on to. The lot in Invermere, Mom's lot, my grandmother's lot before that, had been designated in the will to be split between my brother and me. But my great-uncle had been listed as someone who should be contacted for reference, as a kind of informal check. A way my mother had built in, without making it complicated, to ensure her wishes were actually carried out. My brother had never contacted him, because contacting him would have meant acknowledging that I existed, that I had a share coming to me, that the will said what it said, the RRSP, the insurance policy, the lot. He'd handled all of it as executor, and he'd reported back to me that there was almost nothing left. $4,000 and an apology about how expensive everything had become. I sat down in one of the chairs with the tired upholstery. Nobody asked me to. My legs just decided. My great-uncle sat down across from me. He had the paper bag from the pharmacy still in his lap. He set it carefully on the floor. "Your mother wrote to me about you," he said. "She was proud of you. She said you were very good with numbers." I didn't trust my voice, so I didn't use it. "She also told me that she worried about you, that you were too trusting, that you always assumed the best about people." He glanced at my brother, who hadn't moved. "She said she hoped she was wrong to worry. She wasn't wrong." What happened next took months, not days. I want to be honest about that because I've seen how these stories get told, like justice is something that shows up promptly, like the truth arrives and everything resolves itself tidily by the following week. It doesn't work that way. I got a lawyer. She was calm and thorough and had an office near Chinook Center that smelled like fresh coffee, and she explained to me what probate fraud looks like and what proving it takes. We got a copy of Mom's actual will from the courthouse. It had been filed, which my brother apparently hadn't counted on mattering. Wills are public record once they go through probate in Alberta. The original document was clear. Half and half. The Invermere lot to be liquidated and split. The RRSP, which had me named as a co-beneficiary, to be split. The life insurance policy, same. Instead, I'd received $4,000 and a story about debt. My great-uncle provided the letter my brother had sent him, the one that said I was dead. My lawyer said that was actually helpful. My brother's lawyer, at some point during the process, floated the idea of a private settlement. My brother would repay the difference. No criminal involvement, everyone moves on. My sister-in-law apparently pushed hard for this option. I was told she had a lot to say about family loyalty and the damage public proceedings do to everyone involved. I thought about that word, loyalty. I thought about the guest room and the proposed home gym. I thought about $4,000. I thought about sitting in that office chair while a man I'd never met told me my mother had been proud of me. I said no to the settlement. My brother was charged with estate fraud. In Alberta, that falls under the criminal code, obtaining property by false pretenses, among other things. The letter claiming I was dead became a significant piece of evidence. It took 14 months from the day on the bus to the day the matter was resolved. He pleaded guilty to a reduced charge in the end, received a conditional sentence, and was ordered to make full restitution, which meant everything he'd taken, with interest, including the value of the Invermere lot, which he'd sold 18 months after Mom died to a developer who'd since built a small vacation property on it. The restitution figure was not nothing. I won't say the number because it's not the point. The point is that my mother left me something real, and someone I trusted took it, and I got it back. I quit the flooring company about a month after the conviction. Not dramatically, I gave proper notice, I trained my replacement, I brought in donuts on my last day. But I'd been thinking for a while about going back to school, actually finishing a degree instead of the certificate, and I now had something to help me do that without going into debt I couldn't manage. I enrolled in the business program at Mount Royal for the fall. My great uncle and I have had dinner twice since then. He's in his late 70s, and he has opinions about hockey and very strong opinions about how long to steep tea. And he told me on our second dinner that my mother used to send him photos of me at Christmas. He still has them. He offered to make copies. I said yes. My brother and I haven't spoken. I don't know that we will. That's not something I've resolved in myself yet, whether I'm keeping the door closed or whether it's just closed right now and might open some other day. I don't feel the need to decide. What I keep coming back to is the bus. The ordinary, unremarkable fact of giving someone your seat because they needed it and you had it to give. I didn't help that man because I expected anything. I helped him because the bus lurched and nobody moved, and it seemed like the obvious thing to do. My mom would have done the same thing. Every time I think about that morning, I think about the version of things where I stayed in my seat, where I put my headphones in and minded my own business like everyone else, where an old man in a pharmacy bag struggled to find his footing and I looked away. That version exists. I almost lived it. I'm glad I didn't.